My parents sold our house to get money for traveling when I turned 18, and I was left homeless. 5 years later, my mom came to me in tears because my dad had cheated on her. I laughed in her face and slammed the door. I'm 23 now. My parents disowned me when I was 18. Since childhood, I had a very difficult relationship with them, and I understood well that I was an unwanted child. When I was little, I tried to earn their love and affection, but when I realized it was pointless, I stopped trying and focused on my own life. I think the change in me started sometime in middle or high school. In high school, I only talked to my parents when I needed something and tried not to bother them. It's not that I didn't want to have a relationship with them, it's just that they made it so clear they didn't want anything to do with me that I felt awkward even approaching them, even when I really needed help. I knew I had no one else to count on but them. My dad was a pediatrician and my mom taught science in middle school, so they were generally good with kids. The irony was that they got along much better with other people's children than their own. By the time I was in high school, I had already decided I would stop trying to win their approval. We lived completely separate lives and barely interacted. Dad would come home late and mom got home around the same time I did, but we didn't talk. We didn't even exchange a few words. We just stayed in our rooms. I'm not exaggerating. It felt like I lived with strangers. We had the bare minimum of contact, and that was it. I also knew that if I wanted to go to college, I'd have to pay for it myself. On my 18th birthday, my parents made it very clear that up until then, they were only around because the law required it. Now that I was legally an adult, I had to take care of my life on my own. They framed it as support for my independence, but I knew what it really meant. They just wanted to be rid of me. They didn't care if I became independent or not. I didn't apply to any colleges because I decided to take a gap year and try to save up some money. I knew I'd need money to live on, and without it, college was out of the question. So, after I turned 18, I started looking for a job and quickly got hired at a local supermarket. The pay was low, but I felt good finally earning my own money. Unfortunately, my happiness was short-lived. Just a few weeks into the job, I faced new problems. My parents told me they were selling the house and that I needed to start looking for a place to live. I had no idea what was going on. When I asked why, they said they were quitting their jobs and going on a trip across the country with the money from the sale. They claimed they had saved for this their whole lives, and now that I had a job and was old enough to live independently, they no longer had any obligations. They said they were fulfilling their dream and giving me a head start. This put me in a terrible position. I had just started working and hadn't saved anything, not even enough for shared rent. Even with roommates, I had barely begun saving, and living on the street would make college completely impossible the following year as I had planned. My parents simply told me, if you don't find a place to live, you'll be homeless. I tried to talk to them and asked them not to sell the house for at least a few more months, so I could save up more, but they refused and didn't care about my struggles. They said they had waited too long and wouldn't delay their plans any longer. Your problems are your problems now, my mom said. You're an adult and we're no longer responsible for you. This house is ours and we'll do whatever we want with it. Where you'll live is not our concern. Those were her exact words, and I still remember them because they were incredibly hurtful and humiliating. That day we had the worst fight of my life. I never saw or heard from them again after that. I knew they'd never contact me again. I told them they were horrible people and wished them the worst because they completely deserved it. I cursed them out without caring that they were my parents. I didn't care. They didn't care what would happen to me. The problem was that while I stormed out of the house in anger, I later realized I literally had nowhere to go. I had no relatives willing to take me in because my parents didn't maintain ties with their families. They both lived separately from their relatives, rarely attended family events or holidays, and I had no close relationships with any of them. I barely knew these people, so counting on them was pointless. Besides, we lived in a different state, so I couldn't even reach them. I had a few school friends, but they were already in college, and I didn't want to impose on them or their families. It would have been too awkward. So I decided to take a risk and called a coworker who is now my wife. That decision led to a crazy chain of events, but I'm glad I reached out to her. We worked at the supermarket together. She managed the cosmetics department. We had been flirting since I started and had become close, learning a lot about each other. I knew she also had a rough relationship with her parents, so I thought she'd understand. She was 2 years older than me and hadn't gone to college either. Her dad was an addict, and her mom only cared about herself. When she turned 18, her dad moved in with his brother, and her mom told her she couldn't support her anymore. Since then, she'd worked hard to save money for beauty school to become a makeup artist. When I called and explained my situation, she immediately told me to come over and offered to let me stay with her. I was incredibly grateful. I don't think I would have made it on my own, especially since it was cold outside and I had no other help. Even though her apartment was tiny and she was barely getting by, she still chose to help me, and that says a lot about who she is. She took me in, and for the first few months, I didn't pay rent because I was trying to save money. But I helped with groceries and bills, and when I had enough saved, I started paying my share of the rent. Before we knew it, we went from being just friends to people who couldn't live without each other. Originally, I planned to work at the supermarket for about a year and a half, but after cutting ties with my parents and realizing I had nowhere else to go, I worked even harder. I'm still working there, but now I have a much better position. I applied for a shift supervisor role, and thankfully I got it because I was one of the most responsible and dedicated employees. That's how the last year went. I make decent money, and my wife is now attending beauty school while working part-time at the store. Everything was going well until last week when my mom showed up unannounced. I have no idea how she found me since we hadn't spoken in 5 years. As soon as I opened the door, she rushed to hug me before I could even react. I made the mistake of not checking the peephole. When I came to my senses and asked why she was there, she had already placed her bags at our door. She said she was back because Dad left her. She told me what they had been doing the last few years, and I'll try to keep it short. They traveled the country for a year and a half, then settled in California, got jobs, and rented a place. But a month ago, Dad told her he was having an affair with a waitress near his office and was leaving her. She said she chose dignity and self-respect and came back, but now had nowhere to live. She needed to save money for a divorce and didn't want to spend on rent with retirement approaching. So she decided to move in with me without even asking. So I repeated her exact words back to her, that I'm an adult and she's not responsible for me, that this is my home and I can do whatever I want with it without asking her permission, and that she needs to take care of herself. I told her she's no longer family and slammed the door in her face with a smile and a laugh. It was probably the most satisfying thing I've ever done, but my wife thinks I went too far and believes I should give her another chance. We didn't argue, but after what she saw, she felt I was too harsh and should at least consider it. Her parent passed away in recent years, and I think that's affecting how she sees the situation. Still, I felt no guilt for turning my mom away when she came back 5 years later, asking to live with me. Update 1. I talked to my wife about what she said. We didn't argue about what happened, but I could tell it bothered her. She didn't fully approve of how I handled it, though she also understood that it was my personal history with my mother, and that I had the right to deal with it as I saw fit. She tried to keep her opinion to herself, but it started creating tension between us. Yesterday, after reading a few comments, I decided to talk to her again. I told her more about my childhood, explained how my parents always treated me like an outcast in my own home. And even with all that, I somehow put up with it, tried to stay out of their way, be invisible. But even that wasn't enough. They still had to make my life harder. That's why I didn't feel even the slightest guilt for refusing to help my mother when she needed it. They hadn't even bothered to ask how I was doing in all those 5 years, and now she was back just because she needed something from me. I explained all that to my wife, though she already knew most of it. She apologized for how she reacted. As I suspected, she was just sensitive to the situation because she lost both her parents in recent years. Her father died from addiction, and her mother from a heart attack. So she had a hard time processing what she saw. But now things between us are fine, and I'm glad we talked it through. Meanwhile, my mother has been acting horribly. For some reason, she thinks that harassing me on social media will somehow convince me to let her stay with us. When really all she needed to do was apologize and hope for the best. But, like a true narcissist, she chose the exact opposite approach, and of course, it backfired. She started posting online that her husband and son are treating her with extreme cruelty, claiming that at this stage in life, she regrets ever investing so much time in us. She accused me of being just like my father, abandoning her when she needed help most, without even acknowledging that she had done the exact same thing to me, if not worse. She created a fake account and began tagging me, my wife, all our friends and relatives in these posts. I have no idea how she even knows this much about my life, who I married, where I live. It's creepy because I never told her anything, and none of it is online. My wife and I have private profiles, so how she got that info is beyond me. Everyone she tagged has been trying to report the account to get it taken down, but we know as soon as it's banned, she'll just make another. Honestly, I don't want to involve the police. It's such a hassle, and my wife and I don't have the time. But if she keeps pushing, we won't have a choice. I really don't know what to do. It's just incredibly frustrating and infuriating. More than anything, I wish my dad would just take her back so we wouldn't have to deal with this. For now, her behavior is just annoying. Hopefully, it stays that way. The last thing I want is for it to start affecting our actual lives. It's been 2 weeks, and my wife and I are still dealing with the aftermath of turning my mother away. She's moved to the next level. Now she comes to the store where I work and just stares at me menacingly. She usually shows up around noon and loiters in the store for about an hour and a half, glaring at me the entire time. I didn't care. I did everything I could to ignore her. That seemed like the best way to handle it. I gave her zero attention all week, and it looked like she finally realized this tactic wasn't going to work. But instead of backing off, she did exactly the opposite. Like she was deliberately trying to sabotage any chance of me feeling sympathy. Yesterday, she didn't come to the store, and I felt a wave of relief. I thought maybe she had finally backed off. But when I walked out after my shift, she was waiting by my car. This time, she wasn't angry. She just looked sad. And for a brief moment, I felt a little sorry for her because she looked worse than before. I have no idea where she's living. As far as I know, she cut ties with most of her friends when she went traveling. If she's trying to save money, there's no way she can afford a hotel. I didn't ask. It's not my business. I walked toward my car and tried to ignore her and just get in, but she stepped in my path and wouldn't move. She kept repeating that she needed to talk. After 5 minutes, I gave in and asked what exactly she wanted to say. And after everything she had done, she suddenly started bawling, loud, uncontrollable sobbing. She was hysterical, crying so hard she couldn't even speak. And yeah, I started to worry a bit. I don't love my parents, especially my mom, but I'm not heartless. I could tell she was really hurting. That's the only explanation for her behavior. I tried to calm her down and offered to let her sit in the car so she could collect herself and we could talk. If she hadn't broken down like that, I definitely wouldn't have let her in. But given everything, I think it's important to mention that. A lot of people started calling me all sorts of names after my last update. So I want to be clear, I still haven't gone to the police or hired a lawyer, mostly out of compassion. And also because it's just a huge hassle. Money, time, stress. Not everyone can afford that. Once she was in the car, it took a while for her to calm down, but then she started talking. Since she and Dad moved to California, he'd started acting weird. Finding out about the affair broke her. She came back because she couldn't stand to be around him anymore. Everything reminded her of how badly he hurt her. She had hoped I would help because she had literally no money. She even had to borrow cash from a few friends in California just to get back here. She had quit her job years ago when they started traveling and never worked again. In California, she was a full-time housewife, totally financially dependent on Dad. Now that their marriage is over, she has no one to turn to. She burned all her old bridges, has no friends left, and her relatives have abandoned her too. I was her last option. Her voice was full of desperation, but all I felt was disappointment. I listened and told her the most I could offer was some money for expenses, but she would never live with me. I don't trust her. After what she did to me, she doesn't have the right to expect more. She got angry and said that if that's how it was, then she didn't want anything from me at all. She got out of the car and slammed the door so hard it was obvious she was offended, and then she walked away. Update 3. My mother hasn't tried to contact me for almost a month now, and it seems like she's finally left. I don't know where she is, but at least I figured out how she got all that information about me. I had an old Facebook account that I hadn't used in years. I forgot the password, and I couldn't recover it because it was tied to an email I no longer had access to. So I made a new profile. Unfortunately, the old account was public, and I'm pretty sure that's where she got her info. I had tagged friends in photos I posted from the new account, and in a lot of those pictures, I was standing in front of our apartment. I guess that's how she found out where I live. I didn't do anything about it. There was no point anymore. She already knew so much about me, and I'm pretty sure she's not going to try to reach out again. She tried, realized it was useless, and won't waste any more time on it. I don't know what she's doing now because I haven't spoken to her, and honestly, I hope it stays that way. I don't want her back in my life. Do I wish her harm? Of course not. Despite everything, I don't want anything bad to happen to her, but I also don't want her anywhere near me. A few weeks ago, some of her friends contacted me. They said that after I turned her away, she started asking them for help, but none of them responded. According to them, they had no reason to. She had ignored them for years, even when they tried to stay in touch. Now that she was struggling, they didn't feel obligated to help. They said she mentioned staying at a motel just outside of town in her messages, but now she's blocked everyone, and they think she's left and no longer needs help. We'll see what happens next, but I'm certain that once the divorce process begins, she'll try to reach out again. Update 4. Well, big news. It's been almost a year since I last spoke to my mother. Honestly, I was surprised she didn't try to contact us again during all this time. I figured she must be in the middle of a divorce, since according to her, she had no money. I couldn't understand how she planned to hire a lawyer. But recently, I found out from some relatives that she got back together with my father. That was a shock. Last time I saw her, she was devastated because he had cheated on her. And now suddenly they're back together? It made no sense. At my cousin's wedding, I ran into a few relatives. My parents were there, of course, as always. That's how I found out. I wanted to understand how they could possibly reconcile, so I talked to a couple of aunts. We're not particularly close, but they're well informed about family gossip, and they told me everything. Turns out, a few weeks after my mom returned to my dad, she gave him an ultimatum. Either he filed for divorce from her, or she would do it herself, and she wouldn't be kind about it. But by that point, my dad had already tried talking to the waitress he had the affair with about marriage. He told her he had left his wife for her. The funniest part? She never even took him seriously. Apparently, she had multiple guys in her life, and my dad was just one of those naive fools who fell head over heels. When she explained everything to him, he ended the relationship, and that's how my parents ended up back together. Honestly, I'm glad. They deserve each other. If they had broken up and started seeing other people, those poor souls probably would have ended up with lifelong emotional trauma, and I wouldn't wish that on anyone. So it's better that they stay together. My wife and I laughed about the whole thing for a long time. It's all turned out just as expected. They've become the laughingstock of the whole family. Exactly what I expected from them.